Okay. Today is April 7th, 2015. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library in Dix Hills, New York. We are interviewing Harvey R. Cohen, a World War II Navy veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Harvey, for your service and for being here today and participating in our project.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Harvey, where and when were you born?
I was born May 24th, 1925, in Brockton, Mass.
Okay. And your parents, what were their names and what did they do?
My mother was Elizabeth Harriet Goldstein. She was originally a bookkeeper and typist and a brailleist.
Oh.
And
Was she transcribed books into Braille?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. And your dad?
And my dad was the head shoe cutter for the Diamond Shoe Company, the largest shoe company in the world. They had their headquarters in Brockton. And then when they moved, he left and went to Lowell and went into the paper tube business with his older brother. And it was the Merrimack Paper Tube Company, and he was also a champion bowler, and he was a boxer.
Wow.
Until my grandmother caught him.
Now, where was he born and what was his name?
His name was Henry, and he was born in Luna, in Grodna Gubernija, which is Belarus.
Okay. Good.
He came over when he was 9.
9. Did he speak Russian at home? Or?
My father spoke Yiddish, and he spoke Russian, he spoke English, and he was well educated.
Did you have siblings?
I had a sister.
What was her name?
Sylvia.
Did she serve in the military?
No.
And what were you doing before you entered the service?
I was going to college.
Whereabouts?
Georgia Tech.
And what were you studying there? What did you study there?
Chemical engineering.
Now, in which branch of the service did you serve?
Navy.
Navy. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Enlisted. Why did you choose the Navy?
Very strange. I was taking Harvey R ROTC, and there were 2 Harvey Cohens, and I was going in to sign my papers to join the Army Reserve, and as I went by the list, I see that my name was not on the dean's list, and I couldn't understand why, because I had a very high point average. So I went up to the major in charge, and I asked him why. And he said, well, you cut so many drills, we had to take it off your record. I said, I didn't cut any. He says, it's right here, Harvey L. Cohen. I said, I'm Harvey R. And I said, will you change my grade? And he said, no. And I said, why not? He says, I don't want the bursar to know that I made a mistake. So I said, well, I have here my enlistment papers in the Army Reserve. I have a letter of consent from my mother, and I've had my physical. He said, I said, are you going to change things? He says, no. I don't want to admit that I made a mistake. So I said, thank you very much. I reached down, I took the enlistment papers, I ripped it up, I gave it back to him, and he says, where are you going? I said, I'm going down to join the Navy. And I walked 5 miles to the heart of Atlanta, and I enlisted in the Navy.
Wow. That's a great story.
That was true story.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great. So I wonder what happened to him.
I don't know, and I don't care.
Right. Wow. Now, why did you want the Navy instead?
Well, I always wanted the Navy. Ever since I was that high, we had a large noise over the house one day, and I went out in the backyard, and I looked up, and there was a Navy Zeppelin, the Shenandoah, and it would lower an aircraft out, it would fly around, come back, and I turned to my mother and I said, I'm going to be a naval aviator.
Wow.
And I went to flight school, and then my pilot had a heart attack, and I brought the plane in,
Oh, my God.
but we crashed. He was killed, and I was thrown out, and I got a concussion.
Was this during training or?
Training.
Uh-huh.
And I got a concussion, and they told me that I couldn't fly. So I went to Navy photo school, became a photo interpreter.
What does that involve? Photo interpreter?
Targeting. You get targets, and you pick out the targets, select the targets, and give the information to the pilots that are going to do the bombing run.
Oh, I see. Huh. Wow. What happened when you departed for training camp? And this is going back now, and your early days of training. Where was training camp?
Actually, I did it in college. I got into this V12 program. We called it Victory in 12 Years or We Fight.
Oh, wow.
But what it was a combination. Actually, I was V5, which was Naval Aviation. But then they combined it, and they decided they needed engineers. So I was sent back to the same school, and we were in uniform.
And Georgia Tech.
Yep, got paid $50 a month as seaman, and stayed in the Navy there till I graduated. And when I graduated, I went to midshipman school,
Where was that?
Fort Schuyler,
Where's that?
Bronx.
The Bronx. Okay, right.
It's under the Throgs Neck Bridge.
Okay.
And half was Navy, and the other half was the State Maritime College. And I went to midshipman school there, and I graduated in the top 10 of the class.
Wow. Do you remember what year that was? What year?
Yeah, 1943. However, we had a little problem. 26 of us, there were 500 in our class. 26 were posted as unofficer-like material. And I had to go to an interview because of that. And since my name began with a C, I was the first one. So as I came in, I saw the list. And I took one look at it, and they brought me inside, and they asked me why I joined the Navy, and I told them as a child, I always wanted to be a naval officer. And I went through the spiel, and they said, do you have any questions? I said, yes. I said, I have one. I said, have you gone over the list of the 26 names? And they said, no, you're the first one. Why do you ask? I said, it seems awfully strange to me that out of 500 men in the company, 26 are selected, and every one of the 26 is Jewish.
Oh,
They said, step outside. So I stepped out. They called me back in about 5 minutes later. They had gone over it. And they said, we want to apologize. I said, no apologies are necessary. I said, I just want what's coming to me. And they said, you are. And I was,
Accepted in.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Do you know what happened to the other 25?
yeah. One guy flunked out. 2 were number 1 and 2 in the class. The rest of I was number 8. I was 8th in the class, and everybody, really excelled. And I ran into him after the war.
Who, the one interviewing you? Or
The ensign. The one that...
picked the 26?
Yeah. And I ran into him after the war. He's standing behind me and waiting to go to a Japanese restaurant. So he looked at me and he didn't recognize me, and I told him who I was. And I said, what's your rank? He says, I'm still an ensign. And I said, oh? I said, I hate to tell you this, I said, but I outrank you. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm a Lieutenant JG, and I'm on the selection list for a senior lieutenant, and I'm stationed at Naval Air Station, Brooklyn, Floyd Bennett Field. He said, do they have any billets? I knew we didn't have any. And I said, oh, we got plenty of billets. I'll put a recommendation in for you. So I went to the personnel officer and I said, when this character comes down, send him back, tell him to come back every 2 weeks for about 4 weeks, and then tell him you have no billets.
Good for you.
Oh, yeah. That's what we did to him.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
You think, obviously it seemed intentional that he did that.
Oh, yeah. He was an anti-Semite.
But how come the others didn't recognize that when they got the list?
Because I speak out. Nobody kicks me around.
Oh, my God.
And the other guys took it. And I said, you're crazy. You got to open your mouth. Yeah. And when I graduated, my sister and my brother-in-law came, and we had a supply officer. He was Jewish, but he didn't associate with any of us, and he never came to our defense. And my graduation, my brother-in-law saw him, and they walked up and they embraced. He was my brother-in-law's salesman.
What do you mean?
Prior to the war.
Oh. He worked for your brother-in-law?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he said, that's my brother-in-law. And he looked at me and he said, I wish I had known. I said, you don't judge by who you know. I said, you made a terrible mistake. And I said, all I want from you is an apology. And that was it.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Did you feel there was more of that going on as time went on in the...
No, the only time I had any trouble aboard ship was with a Mormon. And there were 2 ensigns. He was a senior. He was also a senior ensign. And my roommate, his name was Gertz, was kosher. And he wouldn't eat ham. And my rabbi told us, he said, if there's nothing else to eat, he said, you eat what's before you. He said, and don't worry about it. And they served ham every day purposely.
Oh.
So I ate it, and Schlickman says to me, have to report to the rabbi that he's eaten ham. And I said, yes. And I said, you're a Mormon, aren't you? He says, yes. I said, your leader was Brigham Young? And he says, yes. I said, and you're not supposed to drink anything with caffeine? He says, that's right. And I said, every night when I relieve you from the deck, I said, you're supposed to tap us on the shoulder. And I said, you always knock me across the bridge. I said, well, I've got news for you. I said, you've been drinking hot chocolate. And he says, yes. I said, did you know there's more caffeine in hot chocolate than there is in coffee? And he looked at me and he says, what can I drink? And I says, you're dumber than I thought. I said, you ever hear the word milk?
Good for you.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And after that, he was much better.
Really? Do you recall your instructors at all this was during ROTC and training later?
Well, no, but as far as college is concerned, I had one of the most brilliant men in charge of the chemical engineering department, Dean Mason, and he took me under his wing. And they wouldn't let me into the lab because they didn't work with dirty Jews.
Oh, who said that?
The group. So I'm a Cohen Gadol. So I put a curse on him. And I said, okay. I said, you can't call me a dirty Jew. I said, because according to my religion, I said the first thing I'm supposed to do when I get up in the morning is I'm supposed to have a bowl of water there to wash my hands and wash my feet before I say my morning prayers. And I said, don't call me a dirty Jew.
Wow.
And that was it.
Now, did you get any specialized training once you were full-fledged, in the Navy?
Yeah. I went to special school in Denver. I went to the Armed Forces. I was selected for a 33-week course, the Armed Forces Intelligence School. And there I studied every phase of intelligence, atomic energy, side-looking radar, you name it, all the new things.
You think you were selected or you chose that because of your background? Or?
I was selected, I guess, because of my background. And it was very interesting on the side-looking radar. In fact, just before I went in for the thing, there were 2 Air Force officers in the class, and they thought they'd pull something on me, and they says, hey, come on out here, we want to show you some photography. You're a photo interpreter? I said, yes. They said, what is it? And I looked at it, and I said, it's the Hudson Valley. And they said, that's correct. I said, but it's not a photograph. They said, what do you mean? I said, it's SLR, side-looking radar. And I said, the blank in the middle is the fuselage of the aircraft. And they looked at me, and when I got through with them, they said, how do you know so much about this? I said, I flew the mission. It was in a Mohawk, a single-engine aircraft that was designed by the German government.
Where did you fly that?
I flew it over the Hudson. I was the co-pilot.
Oh, that was the one that crashed?
No,
No.
that was another time.
Oh.
Yeah.
So once you had the training in Colorado, then where did you go after the training was done?
Colorado?
Colorado.
I'm trying to think. When I finished there,
Was that in the 43, 40?
no, I'm a little confused on the
Later?
dates.
Later, oh.
Yeah.
But you lived, once you got the training, then you were stationed somewhere. Where were you stationed? Where did you serve?
I served in Iceland.
Iceland. How did you adapt to the military life there, the food and the barracks and all that regimen?
Well, officers lived in officers' quarters.
Better. Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, there were none. We had a hotel,
Oh, nice.
and we shared it with the airport. And I got to be very friendly with the airport manager. He came looking for me, and it turns out that I had a very close friend I went to Georgia Tech with. His name was Bill Stein, and his friend was the head of Lufthansa.
Oh.
And they ran the airport. So he made arrangements for them to look after me.
Nice.
And I'll tell you, they took good care of me in Iceland.
How long were you stationed there?
I was there for 2 tours. In fact, I was the first American to ever be invited into an Icelandic home at a party.
Nice.
And the guest of honor was a newspaper editor from Sweden, and the vice president was there from
Our vice president?
Iceland.
Oh,
And he and I got to be talking, and he said to me, I think it was around midnight, and I said, whoops, I gotta go. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a curfew on Americans. And I said, I have to be back in the hotel by midnight. He said, oh, I'll extend it for you. And I said, thank you, sir, but no thanks. I said, if it applies to one American, it applies to all.
nice.
And he says, very commendable, I'll walk you back, which he did. And after that, I was invited into parties at Icelandic homes and so forth.
Nice. So when you were over there, you did this photographic...
No.
What did you do?
I was there,
What were your duties there?
well, actually, I'm trying to think what might do. Oh, I was anti-submarine warfare.
Oh.
That was my specialty.
So what did that involve?
Well, the Icelandic Straits are the only entrance to the North Atlantic navigable. And any Russian subs that wanted to come in had to go through the Icelandic Straits.
Mm-hmm.
And my job was to keep an eye on them.
Oh,
In fact, during one NATO exercise, I picked one up in our zone, and I went to the admiral and I told him, and He says, what are your recommendations? I said, it's posted. NATO posted it, and I said, it's in Brussels, stating it's out of bounds. And I said, we attack it with practice depth charges, just to rattle his bones, and dropped it right on him.
Oh.
Put a hole on him in the sail, and they had to come up. And they came up, and the whole crew came out and lined up, and they went like this to us.
Do you remember when that was?
Yeah. It
What
was
year?
19... It was in the 50s.
Okay. After the war.
Yeah, it was during the
During
Korean.
Oh, okay.
And we asked them if they needed any assistance. Of course, they said no, and they were towed off by a Russian trawler.
Oh, I see.
And it was very interesting.
Yeah.
And then we had a big ASW exercise up there,
What's that stand for?
anti-submarine warfare.
Ah.
And nobody was getting anything. So I called the officer in charge of one of the squadrons, was VP 11, Patrol Squadron 11, and I said, you want to kill? He says, oh, I'd love it. I said, okay. I said, midnight. I said, go on patrol. I said, come in over the fishing fleet. Cut your engines just before you come. And I said, that what you can glide in. And then when you hit the fishing fleet, turn on your searchlight, a huge thing on it. And there was illuminated was a whole slew of subs.
From
Russia.
Russia.
And everybody got a big kick out of that.
And then they turned around and went back? Or
Oh, yeah.
Now, during World War II, you were also stationed in Iceland?
No.
Where were you then?
I was in the V-12 program.
Oh, that was in the States.
Yeah,
Whereabouts?
Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta.
Yeah, I was at Georgia Tech.
Okay, so what were you working on there? What were you
I
doing?
was studying chemical engineering
You were still in school.
in the V-12 program.
Oh, I see. After graduation, you went into that.
No. After graduation, I went to midshipman school.
Okay.
Then I got my commission.
Okay.
And then I went back after I got out, and I got my master's.
Oh, I guess I'm trying to determine what were you involved in during World War II before we move on to further down the road. What were you doing during World War II? You were studying and getting trained?
And also I was responsible for the capture of 9 German saboteurs that came ashore.
Where was that?
Salisbury, Mass. They came ashore from a submarine in a rubber raft, and one guy was a double agent.
He was on our side and the Germans?
He was an American stationed in Berlin. His father was the attaché, and he spoke perfect German and English, and he became a double agent. And he identified himself to me, and he said, make like you're arresting me, which I did. And then we hustled him out, and the others we took prisoner, and they went to prison.
in the States, they're in
Yeah,
prison here.
and through that, we picked up another 9 that came into Florida.
During World War II?
Yep.
Wow. That's, wow. They came via submarines?
Yep.
Wow.
They were coming up they were going to sabotage. They had targets all over the United States. And we picked them up. I got in fact, it was kept confidential, and it wasn't released till 20 years after.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah. And that's when I got my medal and a battle star
For what was that?
for the
Oh, for
Capture-
apprehending,
yeah.
apprehending them?
yeah, they recognized what I had done.
How did I guess from radar, and how were they
No,
identified?
I just happened to be at the right spot at the right time.
In Massachusetts?
No, it was actually New Hampshire,
New Hampshire.
Salisbury Beach here.
Oh.
Yeah.
How far were they from the shore?
When they came, the sub came up. I saw it come up. In fact, I even saw one came down the Hudson River, and this was while I was in midshipman school, and I'm standing watch, and I said, I see a periscope. And I said, what the hell's it doing here? The war was just about over, and actually what he was doing, he was looking to get over to the submarine base, the Navy submarine base in New London, to surrender.
Oh, wow.
And we got him tangled up in our ASW net there, and we put a hole in him, and the sub is still on the side of the rocks in Montauk.
No kidding.
Yeah.
On
yeah.
display?
No, it's there
Oh.
on Long Island Sound.
What happened to him? He got arrested, and
Yeah.
what happened to the other German submarine personnel there?
Oh, they died in the sub.
They died in this.
They drowned.
So we fired on them? Is that how that worked? Or-
I fired a shot at them, and I hit their periscope, and they were blind.
Oh, I see. And so that sunk the submarine.
It didn't sink it, but it got caught in the net and so forth.
Oh.
And then when they went to get out, they had no way to navigate. So they went on to, and they didn't know that there was a sandy beach, and they went along the sandy beach, and then from there it's all rocks. And they went into the rocks. They didn't have a periscope. They didn't have radar.
So they hit the rocks, and that's how they got killed.
Yeah. And it was still there for years.
That was towards the end of the war?
Just about.
Wow. Did you see? So you weren't in Europe. You went to Iceland later during the Korean War. Korean War. Did you witness any battles or destruction, casualties while you were there? In the 50s, this was then.
Not there, not in Iceland.
No. So, what did you do for off-duty time, recreation? Did you go to the other parts of Europe at all?
There wasn't much you could do because you were restricted to the base.
Oh.
And if you did get a pass, you could only go in for so many hours. And then you had to go into your hotel room. And you couldn't come out. I wasn't very happy with the time in Iceland.
Why is that?
They weren't very friendly.
Really?
And It's just,
How long were you there? You said 2 tours. What does that mean?
I was there twice.
Ah.
For two different NATO exercises.
How long a period for each?
Each was about 6 weeks.
Now, when your first assignment was up during World War II, I guess, then you had the option to stay in, or you decided to be career Navy. At what point?
I was released.
Uh-huh.
And I went back to school. And but I kept my reserve commission.
Oh, I see.
That you have to have for 8 years. I had a commitment for 8 years. And I went back to school. I taught at Georgia Tech.
What did you teach? Chemical engineering, or?
I taught industrial hygiene, occupational diseases. In fact, I taught it because I had taken a special course in it. And at one time I was the chief industrial hygiene engineer for the state of Alabama.
Wow. So you said you got a master's.
Yep. And then I almost, I was recruited, supposedly. A group of gentlemen came to me while I was in Birmingham, and they said to me, they knew all about me. And I said, how do you know? He said, we have a source. He said, and I looked at one of the gentlemen and I recognized him right away. It was my father's best friend, Dewey Stone. And he was an entrepreneur. He's the one that, he was the Exodus.
What do you mean?
The ship.
He was on the Exodus?
He bought it.
Oh.
He armed the Israelis during the,
War of Independence?
Yep, everything. He bought B-17s and had them flown into Israel. He supported the state of Israel. In fact, my cousin was the chief, he had the Einstein chair at the Technion, which is the MIT.
Right.
And was an atomic scientist.
Wow.
Aaron Abramson, my cousin.
Wow.
And his son was Tal Abramson. There was a pill that when you swallowed it, it recorded everything that went on in your intestines and so forth. I'm on the table getting an endoscopy at at the hospital for something, and two doctors are talking about this new pill from Israel, and I said, they said, marvelous. I said, do you know who invented it? And they said, no. I said, his name was Tal Abramson. He says, how do you know? I said, he's my cousin.
Wow. Wow.
And he perfected it even further.
Now, do you remember forming friendships, or what kind of camaraderie did you have with your fellow military servicemen while you were serving?
One was Harry Brown. Harry was an old China mate. He spent World War II with Admiral Miles in the Gobi Desert. They traveled every day and sent the weather forecasts, because the weather came from Siberia across the Gobi Desert. and he was in China for a year and a half.
How did you meet? You weren't in China. How did you meet?
No, Harry we met together at Floyd Bennett Field, and we were specialists in ASW, anti-submarine, and we were known as Harry the cop and Harvey the rat catcher.
Why?
They had a rat problem at the Naval Air Station. Men were being bitten at night.
What station? Where was it?
Floyd Bennett.
Oh, wow.
And I was sent there by the Public Health Service. I was a sanitary engineer with CDC. And I took one look, and I surveyed the place, and I found out they had a dump, and it was full of rats. So when I got rid of the dump, they took care of that. Then they couldn't get the ammunition out of the underground lockers, had a black widow spider problem. And nobody would go in. So I put on special gear, went in, cleaned that out.
When was that? During the 50s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I ended up, I was the public works officer and the medical service corps officer, but I was a line officer. So I had multiple duties at the air station, and then I'm all set to get out, and I wake up the next morning, it was a bad snowstorm, and I find out the Korean War broke out.
Ah.
I couldn't get out.
Had to stay.
So that was it.
And where were you stationed during Korea?
I was at Floyd Bennett.
Ah.
And then I was traveling around, going on exercises, anti-submarine. We were doing anti-submarine warfare up and down the coast.
During Korea? Here?
Yeah.
Just make...
Isn't that Pacific? You went into Korea, Korea during, I didn't think.
I can't hear you.
During Korea, you were stationed here?
Yep.
And monitoring the coasts?
Yep. We were doing ASW up and down the coast.
Did you detect problems at any time?
No.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Letters.
Yeah. Now, let's do both of these. When World War II ended, where were you when World War II ended?
I was in Norfolk. And but I couldn't go home because I had to be relieved. And 3 ensigns came up the gangway, and I said, "What did the first 3 that came up said, we're in the Admiral's staff, we're speechwriters."
Oh.
So they went. The other 3 came up, and they said, we're assigned as deck officers. So the first one I looked at, and I said, when you see the exec, you have to report to him, and he'll assign you what you have to do. I said, tell him you want to be the 1st Division officer. I said, that's what I am. I said, I'm in charge of the anchor detail. I said, a few other things. And I said, it's a wonderful job.
So that relieved you? You were
Oh,
able...
wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
So then they go in, report to the exec. Speaker goes on and says, Ensign Cohen, when you finish your watch, the executive officer wants to see you. So I finish the watch and I walk in, and he said, Cohen, you're a dog robber. And I said, me, sir? A dog robber is a guy in the Navy that can get anything. In fact, the Pink Submarine, did you ever see that movie
No, I don't think so.
with Jack Lemmon
I don't think I
and
have.
Tony Curtis?
Okay.
But Tony Curtis was a dog robber. He could get anything. In fact, his name was actually Bernie Schwartz, and his daughter was my neighbor in Montauk, and that's how I got to be friendly with him. And he'd come knocking on the door, and he'd say, "Radio Man, second class, Bernie Schwartz." He served on a submarine in World War II.
Now, why did the officer call you to see him?
A dog robber,
Yeah.
because I could get things.
Oh, but why did he want you to come and see him? Was he relieving you of your duties?
No. My relief was there,
Okay.
and I could go home.
Okay.
So he's
Okay.
wanted to know why I talked him into that. And I said, "What would you have done in my place?" And he says, "Exactly what you did." He says, "How soon can you be off the ship?" I said, "Give me 15 minutes."
Wow. And then where did you go after that?
I went home.
Went home. And that's when you went back to school?
Yeah,
Okay.
I went back to school, got my master's, and I went to work, so forth, and that was it.
Well, then you re-upped again, right?
I got recalled.
Recalled. Oh, they called up the reserves for Korea.
Yeah.
I see.
We say we got that new disease,
What's that?
going to Korea.
That's cute. So you were in the service for
I had 34 years good service.
wow. Where were you when the Korean War ended?
I was at Floyd Bennett.
Okay.
I was running a boot camp.
Oh, wow.
I had 600 men. Everyone was Jewish.
Really?
Yep.
That's unusual.
They came from Brooklyn.
I see. Wow.
I started the first Jewish community at Floyd Bennett, and the captain used to come to the services. And I got a Reform rabbi who was a lieutenant, J.G., to come from the 3rd Naval District. And we had services. And the captain came to Jewish services. And then we would serve the Jewish war veterans from across the island, Long Beach, used to come over and bring corned beef sandwiches, salami sandwich, and they'd have a spread for us. Well, the next thing you knew, every goy was a Jew.
Nice.
They didn't care,
Right.
and they lined up, and we had a ball. Then we built a synagogue, and then we built a chapel
On the
And-
base, you mean?
on the base, and it rotated. Catholic, Jewish, and Protestant.
Nice. Very nice.
And I was the head of the Jewish community.
Very nice.
I was very proud of that.
Sure.
And when I got up to Iceland the first time, I got off the plane and I was wearing aviation greens. And as I came down, there's a group of civilians there. And they're applauding me. I looked at them and I said, "What are you applauding me for?" It was Rosh Hashanah.
Oh.
And they said to me, we saw the manifest. You're the 10th man.
Oh, they have a minion.
I made the meeting, and I
great.
conducted the services. Then the following week, we got a rabbi in, and he took over. But I started the Jewish community up in Iceland.
Very nice.
That, to me, I was more proud of that than anything else I had done.
Sure. So you're still a member of the Jewish War Veterans
Oh,
to
yeah.
this day? Any other
I'm
veterans?
a life member.
Life member. Any other vets organizations you're a member of?
No.
Now, when did you finally retire from the military?
1980?
81?
85. Well, this is 85. I don't know.
It had 81. I thought it was 81. No. Okay, so when you retired from the military in the early 80s,
I'm sorry.
what did you do then? 81. What did you do after that? 81, you retired from the military.
Oh, I was teaching up at Columbia
Oh, what did you teach there?
at the Graduate School of Public Health.
And how long were you there?
Oh, I taught there for several years. I taught foreign doctors insect rodent-borne diseases and their control.
Public health in the graduate program at Columbia.
Yeah.
Now, how do you feel your wartime experiences affected your life?
I think it made a man out of me.
Can you think of some life lessons you may have learned from the military service you did?
Discipline, love of country, and love of religion.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I think that every young man should serve 2 years for the discipline. If he can't serve with the military, then the peace school. At least contribute something.
Like in Israel, they do that.
Yeah.
Women too.
Well, women too. My cousin was a tank driver.
In Israel?
Yeah.
Wow.
She's a character. Yes.
What is there anything you may have done in the military that you regretted?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. And were you ever injured?
Only when I was in that plane
The
crash.
plane crash. Yeah. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might hear this interview?
I think that they should respect people, respect the government, and give service one way or the other. And I hope there's no more wars, but if there is, it's our duty to serve.
Is there anything we haven't discussed that you would like to add? Anything you can think of we didn't cover that you might like to add?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Harvey, for all your thoughts and memories and for serving our country for us. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.